Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles. So let's cover them comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start, I have a very important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for our online IAS classroom program, you have a great opportunity as you can avail our subscription at just 17,999 along with up to 12 months of free extension. So to avail this special offer, you need to enter the code IAS English, and this offer ends on the 11th of September. And if you avail now, and if you take a 2-year plus subscription, you also get a chance to access our mains residential program provided if you clear the prelims examination, wherein Unacademy will take care of your lodging expenses along with support required for your mains preparation. But in case for some reason if you fail to clear prelims and if you have a 2-year plus subscription, then you will get free access to our prelims and mains crash course for your next attempt. So this is the best possible offer available. So those interested can click on the link in the video description below. And if you want the PDF of this session, please scan the QR code on your screen and join our official Telegram channel. After the session ends, we will be sharing the PDF over here. So let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 6, the Hindu carries a very important column which deals with the FDI inflow and outflow into India. As you all know, FDI, foreign direct investment, plays a very, very important role in the economy of a nation. Through the FDI route, you can bring in foreign investments into key sectors in manufacturing, in services. It will not only bring the investments, this will help in transfer of technology and expertise, which is much needed in order to promote research and development and innovation as well. So there are many benefits when it comes to attracting FDI, the inflow of FDI. So just like foreign investors invest in our country, our companies and investors might also invest abroad. So we will see an outflow of FDI as well. So there will be an inflow and outflow of FDI, of foreign investments. So when you take the net FDI, if the country is receiving a healthy amount of FDI into the country, and if it is being invested in the right sectors, it will help in long-term capital creation. Because generally, FDI is used for asset creation, long-term asset creation. If let's say FDI flows into manufacturing industries, large factories will be set up, the technology, machinery will be brought in, and lakhs of jobs will be created. Similarly, in the services industry as well, if long-term capital flows into our country, it will help in creating the necessary infrastructure. It will bring in the technology and expertise, and it will create lakhs of jobs, maybe millions of jobs as well. So FDI flow is extremely crucial because this is considered to be a part of the macroeconomic health of our country's economy. The overall macroeconomic health of India's economy will be dependent on it. Be it the forex reserves of India, the value of the Indian rupee, they would all be based on the quantum of FDI that's flowing into the country in net terms after accounting for the outflow of FDI. It will help in stabilizing the currency. It will eventually impact every other macroeconomic indicator. But in the case of India, of late, there is a disturbing trend which is developing, according to the writer of this column. See, especially since India introduced the LPG reforms in 1991-1992, India has been a hotspot for attracting FDI. India has seen phenomenal growth over the last 3+ decades, and India has managed to attract significant FDI inflow into the country. But however, the writer has a very crucial point. If you study the trends of FDI flow, the inflow and outflow of FDI, there is something which is quite disturbing. And if you look at the sectors where FDI is being invested in our country, if you look at the duration for which FDI is coming into our country, there are some concerning factors which the writer is pointing out. And that is what we need to understand. Now, according to the writer, if you look at the data provided by the government, from 2011 till 2021, in that 1 decade period, the FDI inflow into India had almost doubled from around $46 billion to almost $84 billion plus. So this indicates a very healthy flow of foreign investments into our country. But of late, that is especially after the pandemic, there are some disturbing trends which are developing. A lot of foreign investors are pulling out their investments. And upon that, Indian companies and Indian investors are investing heavily abroad. So there is an outflow of FDI which is happening. So when you take the net flow of FDI into account, the numbers are quite alarming. Compared to the FDI that we are receiving into the country, the FDI which is essentially being taken out, the foreign investment which is flowing out of the country's economy, has increased at a very significant rate, especially post-pandemic. So today, the net difference between inflow and outflow has come down to $0.4 billion, meaning we are losing almost the same amount of investments as we are receiving into the country. So this could eventually affect your balance of payments. It could affect our ability to match our current account deficit. It could have a spillover effect on the value of the currency, and it could have an impact on the forex reserves held by India. So this could have a cascading macroeconomic impact. And the other concern here is that the quality of FDI. Where are these investments being made? What is the purpose, the intent of the investments which are coming into India? This is quite disturbing. Most of the foreign investors who are investing their money in India, they are all seeking short-term gains. Meaning they're investing for few years and they want very high returns and they are pulling out from the Indian market. Usually, our basic understanding of FDI is that it's a long-term investment. That's what you study in the basics of your economy. When you study Indian economy, the basics will teach you that FDI is often seen as a stable long-term investment because investors are essentially looking at your country as a long-term market, they want to be a long-term player. But in the last few years, we have seen a trend where long-term FDI investments have been declining and foreign investors are largely looking at India as a short-term investment destination. They want to put the money, get high returns quickly in few years or few months, and they are pulling out from the Indian market. So that is one reason why this investment rate is going up. Then Indian investors, the domestic investors, are not eager to invest the money in India. Instead, they are pushing the money out to invest in other countries, in other markets. So this tells you about a fundamental problem in our economy. The reason why investors are not preferring to invest for the long term in India is mainly because of the inadequacies. The inadequacy of infrastructure, the inadequacy of appropriate regulations, the difficulty in setting up and running a business in the country, the availability of resources, and as well as the talent which is required to run these enterprises. So there is a critical flaw which exists in the Indian economy. Though we have the required human resource and manpower, most of them are not well trained or well equipped with the right skills and right talent. Government policies are extremely complicated. India has been over-regulated, and as a result, this scares away the investors and businesses. And we all know the infrastructure gaps in our country. The quality of our roads, the availability of power, the supply of water, the complicated taxation structure in the country, and as well as the complex laws, and the inability to enforce contracts, the difficulty to start a business and to shut down a business. So all these inadequacies in the Indian economy, it is driving away the long-term investors. So only short-term investments are flowing into our country, especially in the last 3-4 years. See, we hit a peak of FDI inflow in 2021, 2022. After that, in the last 3 fiscal years, we have seen a substantial decline in the FDI inflow into our country. And even in that FDI, most of it is for short-term investments. Generally, FDI flow should be greater in the manufacturing industry, where more jobs can be created, more research and innovation can happen. But that is not the case with India. A large part of the FDI coming into our country is going towards services industry. That to specific segments in e-commerce, few tech-based startups, etc., where there are quick returns, quick profits to be made. And once those profits are made and realized, the investors are exiting the Indian market. So that is why the rate of disinvestment has increased, as in the outflow of FDI has gone up. Foreign investors are pulling out quickly from the Indian market after making some profits. Indian investors are looking to invest abroad because they don't want to struggle in the Indian economy because of the inadequacies of infrastructure, regulations, and taxation structures. So this highlights the fundamental problem in the Indian economy, and the writer is essentially providing a caution note to the government. This is a priority issue which needs to be addressed. Because if you don't curb these outflow of FDI, and if you don't push for long-term FDI investments in the country, then this could have a cascading macroeconomic effect. So based on what we have studied, try to take up this practice question for your mains answer writing. Examine the role of FDI in the Indian economy and the recent trends. A very simple, straightforward question. So let's discuss the answer writing approach for this question so it can help you in your answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can explain what is FDI, the role of foreign direct investment, the significance of it. You can even try to draw a parallel with foreign institutional investment. See, when it comes to foreign investments, we have two types, FDI and FII. The FII investments, the institutional investments, go into your capital market, that is primarily into your stock markets. So this foreign investment is often seen as hot capital because it's very volatile. Foreign investors will invest and pull out at any time. This has traditionally been seen as more volatile investment. Whereas FDI was traditionally seen as a very stable investment because it was always for the long term. Whereas foreign institutional investment was always for the short term to make quick profits in the capital markets. But this right now is changing. Because of inadequacies in Indian economy, FDI investors are essentially looking at India as a short-term FDI destination. They're looking to make profits quickly and they're exiting the market without adding value to the Indian economy, which means long-term asset creation is not happening. There is no transfer of technology or transfer of expertise. If making quick profits is the motive, long-term asset and capital creation will never happen. So it is this trend that you need to bring out in the body. So in the introduction, you explain the role and significance of FDI. In the body, bring out the trends and point out the implications. What could be the implications of outflow of FDI? Why Indian investors are investing abroad? Why are they hesitating to invest in India? So point out those reasons as we discussed, and in the conclusion, provide a way forward. Suggest what the government can do to arrest this trend. So the solution is very simple. We need to improve our infrastructure, provide state-of-the-art facilities, from better roads to port infrastructure to simplified rules and regulations and legal policies. Talk about ease of doing business, right? So these measures are necessary, and ensuring the right resources, the right talent is made available to these companies and investors. So suggest 4 or 5 way forwards and policy measures which the government can consider to arrest this trend and reverse the trend of negative FDI flow which we are staring at right now. So that will make for a good answer. So take up this for your answer writing practice and please try to post your answers in the comment section below. Now let's look at a very important editorial on page number 6. This article is also related to the Indian economy. It is specifically related to the demography of India. This editorial is highlighting the concern with regard to the upcoming aging population of India. See, as of today, India has one of the youngest populations in the world. We enjoy the demographic sweet spot, which is often referred to as the demographic dividend, where majority of your population are in the working age group. When majority of your population is the working age group, comprised primarily of the youth, this is the sweet spot in terms of your demography. This is where a country can capitalize on the demography, on the working age population, register massive growth, and ensure the country transitions into a developed economy. But if you don't take the advantage of your demographic dividend, meaning if you don't provide the right education to the youth, to the working age population, if you don't build the right skills, if you don't take care of their health, they can't be productive. They won't contribute to the economy. Instead, it will become a burden on the economy and you'll get trapped. You essentially get trapped in that zone where you can't break out of it. So India right now is facing this challenge and opportunity at the same time. The demographic dividend that we are enjoying right now, which will continue for another 2 decades at least, will be an advantage for India. At the same time, it can become a disadvantage as well. It all depends on how you utilize your youth population, your working age population. But going forward, eventually, our population will start aging. And the data clearly indicates that this is going to be the trend in another 30, 40, 50 years from now. India will suffer the problem of aging population. So let's understand as to what indicators are pointing towards the upcoming aging population and aging demography of India. Recently, the SRS statistical report was published, the sample registration system, the SRS statistical report. It provides data regarding fertility levels in the country, and especially 2 indicators. They are measured under the SRS report, the sample registration system report. One is the crude birth rate, CBR. The other is TFR, total fertility rate. These 2 indicators are critical to understand the changes happening in our demography in terms of fertility rates, birth rates, and depopulation. Now, I'll explain what these indicators are. I'm sure all of you are aware of TFR, total fertility rate. But let me explain what is CBR, crude birth rate. Crude birth rate, it essentially tells you how many live births are happening in 1,000 population in a given year. I'll repeat my point. You take a population of 1,000 people, a sample size of 1,000 people. In 1 year, how many children will be born in that 1,000 population? That indicator is your CBR, crude birth rate. So annually, in a given size of 1,000 people, how many children are being born out of them? So what is TFR, total fertility rate? Total fertility rate essentially refers to the average number of children that a woman has over her reproductive life cycle. Essentially, how many children on an average a couple is having. So if your TFR is 2.1, we call this replacement level fertility, because a couple is essentially replacing themselves with the next generation of kids as they're having 2 kids on an average. So if the TFR is above 2.1, what does that indicate? It indicates that couples are having more than 2 kids on an average, maybe 3 or 4 kids, which means your population is going to rise. And beyond 2.1, you might even see an exponential rise in your population. As the TFR hits closer to 2.7, 2.83, you will see an exponential curve where the population will jump significantly. And the opposite is also true. If your TFR is below 2.1, it means your population is going to decline in the coming years. If you have already achieved replacement level fertility of 2.1, and if the TFR falls to, let's say, 1.9, 1.6, 1.7, 1.2, it means people are having fewer children. And eventually, you will see a declining population. So these two indicators are measured under the SRS statistical report. Now, both these indicators are declining. They are falling in recent years. Crude birth rate has declined to 18.4 compared to 19.1, which was in 2022. Meaning, 3 years ago, in a size of 1,000 people, on a yearly basis, people were having around 19 children on an average. Now, this has reduced to around 18. So, it's a statistical indicator, right? That's why it's in fractions. It's not a whole number, it's in decimals. So, this important indicator of birth rate has seen a decline. And in many states, particularly in southern and western parts of India, also in some eastern, northeastern parts of India, the drop is quite steeper. Which means in another few decades, maybe in another 2 to 3 decades, we will witness a significant decline that's going to be seen in our population as well, in our population numbers. Now, if you look at the state-wise distribution of CBR, the crude birth rate, northern states like Bihar register the highest crude birth rate. Bihar has the highest at 25.8, whereas states like Tamil Nadu registers the lowest CBR at 12. So this again shows the developmental divide and how it is linked with fertility. More developed a region, usually the tendency is to have fewer children. And the vice versa is also true. The more backward or underdeveloped a region, the tendency is to have more children. So this developmental divide, population divide will have serious consequences. The regional divide which is present will create problems in terms of delimitation, in terms of political representation in the parliament, devolution of funds. These are issues which I've repeatedly discussed in our Hindu analysis over the past 1.5 years. Now, apart from that, as a nation, falling CBR and TFR rates is quite concerning. Because if you don't plan accordingly, if you don't prepare your population, if you don't prepare the administration, then you will be left with an aging population without the right support from the state. According to the data, more than 18 states and union territories in our country have already fallen below the replacement level fertility. States like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, even union territories like Delhi, the TFR, total fertility rate, has already gone below 2.1. It's in the range of 1.2 to 1.7, meaning few people are having very few children in these areas, and they will be the first to experience an aging population and a declining population. Kerala currently registers the highest aging population, and this trend is likely to remain. Whereas all the states in India which have a higher TFR than replacement level fertility, they're all northern states. Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and even Chhattisgarh from central eastern India. These are the states in our country which are having a TFR which is higher than replacement level fertility, more than 2.1, meaning their population continues to grow, whereas rest of the country is going to experience a declining population. So this change in our demography creates a huge administrative challenge, a governance challenge. How will you care for an aging population? Because currently there are many countries that we are seeing right now which are dealing with the problem of depopulation and aging population and falling birth rates and fertility rates. Take, for example, countries like Japan, countries like Russia, even South Korea, Italy, and many others. Some of these developed industrialized nations, they have seen significant fall in their birth rates. The death rates have gone up, so they are experiencing depopulation. So they not only have to care for their aging population, they have to provide for sufficient social security. take care of the health of senior citizens, make the healthcare affordable for them, provide caregiving services, what we call as geriatric care, ensure they can live a life with dignity. And at the same time, there are economic and strategic challenges that such a country is going to face. You will not have enough people to work to contribute to your economic growth. Eventually, this will lead to a drop, a decline in your strategic influence. It will affect your standing in the world order. Nobody takes a aging country seriously. They will lose their strategic influence automatically. So this is inherently tied to your national interests. It is also tied to domestic issues, from political representation to devolution of funds. Plus, you have to plan for the well-being of the aging population. So India has to prepare for this. So this is the stark warning being given out by the editorial, that India cannot be complacent. This is going to be the reality in another 25 years, 30 years, 40, 50 years. India will be experiencing a decline with a significant rise in aging population, which means the state has to prepare, the society has to prepare to look after the aging population, to address issues like their mobility and transportation. Because it's not easy for old people to move around on their own as they are no longer physically fit. They will need access to advanced healthcare, including mental and emotional well being. Their livelihood has to be guaranteed through pensions, through insurance, through guaranteed payouts. The way in which cities are built, it should be senior citizen friendly, right? So all these aspects have to be inculcated into our governance. So that is what is being pushed by this editorial, that the government should address this issue. We should start planning from now itself for what we will experience 20 years down the line. So take up this practice question. Tell me what's your view, what's your take on this? Should a country maintain stable population? Maintaining stable population requires a replacement level fertility rate of 2.1. Is it possible practically to maintain a stable population all the time? Or is it a common trend to see a increase and decrease in population numbers? Let me know what you think about this in the comments, because we do have controversial statements being made by some leaders, political and religious leaders, that people should start having more children, right? But their interest is something else. There is a clear political or religious agenda behind certain groups trying to push for people having more children. So let me know what's your view on this. What's your take? Please mention this in the comments. Now, coming to the next article, there is a very detailed article on page number 8 that helps us understand the nature of the boundary issue between India and China. I would like to discuss this quickly because right now, India and China are resetting the relationship. They're trying to normalize the relationship after the Ladakh standoff, which had disrupted the ties for nearly 4 years. So this article gives us a historical view regarding how India and China have managed the boundary issue through boundary agreements that were signed in 1993 and 1996. So let's quickly cover this, and then we have all the small articles which we are going to discuss. So as you all know, India-China fought a boundary war in 1962 over the disputed Himalayan border. So I'll not go into that aspect. That's a completely different discussion altogether. The discussion here will focus on what happened after 1962, especially between 1980s to early 2000s. How did India-China normalize their relationship, even become decent friends, started cooperating with each other by addressing the border issue that was persistent? See, obviously, after the 62 war, which was fought over the border, tensions were always prevalent between the two sides. Frequent skirmishes were happening, incursions were taking place, and our diplomatic ties had completely declined. So for 2 decades, there was no improvement in India-China relations from 1962 till late 1980s. There was absolutely no improvement. Till late 1980s, there was no improvement in India-China relations. The first breakthrough after 1962 war came in the year 1988, when then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi carried out a reset in the relationship. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi carried out a historic visit to China, and this marked a new reset in the relationship. And both sides were very eager to work with each other, help each other while addressing the border issue parallelly. They didn't want the border issue to define the entire relationship. They wanted to create a clear distinction between the bilateral ties, the economic and strategic cooperation from the border issue that was present. But before this friendship could be taken forward, Rajiv Gandhi's government came down. It fell apart. And then we had two coalition governments from 1989 to 1991. So during the coalition era, the governments were preoccupied with stability of the government and other pressing issues. So India-China relationship did not receive much attention during the coalition era. So the next focus on India-China relationship came only in 1991 when P.V. Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister of India. P.V. Narasimha Rao brought a minority Congress-led government to power, and it was under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao that India's foreign policy underwent a major transformation. By 1991, the Cold War had come to an end. A new world order was being shaped with the collapse of USSR. So now India was very desperately looking for new friends and partners. So the Narasimha Rao government launched the Look East policy to build ties with Southeast and East Asian countries. It was the Narasimha Rao government which also established formal diplomatic ties with Israel and started diversifying Indian foreign policy to focus more on Africa and Latin America. So along with this diversification, P.V. Narasimha Rao attempted a reset in India-China relations. He built upon the foundation that was created by Rajiv Gandhi's visit. And under P.V. Narasimha Rao's leadership in 1993, India-China worked out the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, the BPTA, along the line of actual control. Even today, this remains a defining agreement that helps in maintaining peace and tranquility at the disputed border. 3 years later, in 1996, the two sides established another agreement, the confidence building measures between the militaries on both the sides to prevent any unnecessary escalation. And they created arrangements through these agreements to prevent a minor incursion or escalation from turning into a bigger conflict. It's because of these two basic agreements of 1993 and 1996 that India-China have managed to prevent a bigger war, despite repeated incursions and repeated tensions. In the last 20, 30 years, there have been many incursions, many face-offs and military standoffs, but none of the incidents have turned into a bigger conflict. And the credit goes to these boundary agreements of 1993 and 1996. So let's quickly look at the provisions of these agreements as they're relevant even today. See, there was a time when China had made a controversial proposal back in 1950s after China had annexed Tibet and India had expressed support for the Tibetan population. And India had raised questions about China's activities in the border regions where China was building a illegal road in Aksai Chin, which should have been part of India's Ladakh. India objected to the illegal activities of China, raised concern about the suppression of human rights in Tibet, questioned China's maps and territorial claims. So throughout 1950s, tensions were rising. So during this period, China had proposed a very controversial deal which was not acceptable to India. See, first China raised claims over Aksai Chin. It did not recognize the British era boundaries. It tried building an illegal road in 1954. And when India protested, China tried to counter this and it tried to cement its position in Aksai Chin. Then, following the rise of tensions, especially after India accommodated the Tibetan refugees in 1959, then China started questioning India's claims over Arunachal Pradesh as well. It started referring to Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. So, when China triggered these two disputes, one in the west, one in the east, it proposed a controversial swap. China had proposed to Prime Minister Nehru that if India gives up Aksai Chin in Ladakh in the western sector, China will give up the claim on Arunachal Pradesh in the eastern sector. A trade off had been proposed by China. But this was unacceptable to India. It was not acceptable to Prime Minister Nehru because both the territories were Indian territories. India inherited Arunachal Pradesh as well as the entire region of Ladakh, including Aksai Chin, from the British. So, this was a classic Chinese tactic of opening multiple fronts, then proposing to negotiate and proposing a compromise. See, it would be a fair compromise if India was claiming or occupying a part of Chinese territory. Let's say India had occupied a part of Tibet or a part of Yunnan province or a part of Xinjiang. Then China will suggest, okay, we will give up this claim, you keep the other territory. Then it's a fair trade off. But in this case, China was claiming Indian territories, both in Arunachal and Ladakh, proposing an exchange. So this was unreasonable. And India rejected the swap deal. And since then, no boundary talks had taken place. After this, we had the 1962 war. Frequent skirmishes and exchanges were taking place. So the first time we built something concrete to maintain peace and tranquility between the two countries was in 1993. So for nearly 40 plus years, we didn't have any kind of arrangement at the disputed border. So the 1993 agreement is very consequential in this regard. It acquires significance in this regard because it allows for both sides to maintain peace and tranquility at the line of actual control. So under this agreement, the BPTA, the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, it provides for both sides to resist or essentially to give up the use of force and instead focus on talks and negotiations. This agreement mandates both countries to focus on talks and peaceful negotiations to resolve the boundary issue and essentially to stay away from using force. This draws inspiration from the Panchashil principles that were laid down by Prime Minister Nehru and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai in 1950s. If you observed the recent visit of PM Modi to China and his interaction with Xi Jinping, you might have noticed Xi Jinping brought back a reference to Panchshil principles. Xi Jinping said Panchshil agreement is still relevant. Though most Indian experts have written off the Panchshil, Xi Jinping publicly stated Panchshil principles are still relevant between India and China. So this was one of the core principles, to not use force against each other, rather resolve the boundary issue through talks and negotiations. This agreement, the 1993 agreement, also has a provision regarding incursions. Since both sides have a differing perception of the border, if let's say the troops of one country cross over into the other side, which is claimed by the other country, what will happen? Will that turn into a fight? Will that turn into a skirmish? So this is handled under this agreement. There's an article, there's a provision for this. Let's say Chinese PLA troops enter the territory claimed by India, which is patrolled by Indian troops. Then Indian troops will give a warning. They will caution the Chinese troops as per the provisions of this agreement, and accordingly, Chinese troops will have to withdraw. So this applies on both sides. Let's say Indian army has accidentally ingressed into Chinese territory. Since we don't have a common agreement on where exactly is the alignment of this border, there is a possibility that troops might cross over accidentally. So in such cases, if they are cautioned and warned by the other side, they have to retreat and step back. This is a mandate under this agreement. Both sides have agreed under the agreement to address the differing views. They've recognized that we have a differing perception about the alignment of the border. We will sit, talk, and resolve this. And they've agreed to maintain minimal forces at the border to prevent any escalation or turning of a small issue into a bigger conflict. To prevent that from happening, they've agreed under this agreement to maintain minimal number of forces. In fact, there is a ceiling limit as well regarding the forward deployed troops. It also takes into account the complex terrain and geography and the access that both sides have to the border areas. Since China has easier access from the Tibetan plateau, it has better infrastructure as well. Right? China has better roads and rail networks. It can easily mobilize troops. So there is a much stricter restriction on China. Whereas for India, it's more difficult to access the forward areas, given the topography, the terrain of the region, and the difficulties in creating infrastructure. India will take many days sometimes to mobilize troops to the front lines. So the restrictions have taken this into account. Is that clear? So the 1993 agreement deals with the troop deployment and the cap on the deployment of troops for India and China based on the geographical complexity of the border region. Then under the confidence building measures, the CBMs of 1996, the idea was to create some trust, build some confidence between the two armed forces. So under this agreement, both sides are prohibited from using force against each other. There's an article under the 1996 agreement which prohibits the opening of fire. That's why whenever you see a clash between Indian and Chinese troops, they usually don't open fire. You read in the newspapers or you watch videos where the two sides are beating up each other, pelting stones, or using cricket bats or baseball bats or hockey sticks to beat up each other. So it's as if two street gangs are fighting. They don't appear like professional armies sometimes. The reason is there is an agreement between the two sides prohibiting the opening of fire, prohibiting the usage of fire. They can't carry heavy weapons. They can't use the weapons at the front lines. It is prohibited under the agreement. So when Galwan clashes took place in 2020 and soldiers were killed on both the sides, it was because of the hand-to-hand fight that happened between the Indian Army and the PLA, not because there was use of firepower. Because usage of firepower, opening fire against each other is prohibited under this agreement. There are strict restrictions as well on the deployment of military hardware to the front lines, be it the number of surface-to-air missiles, surface-to-surface missiles, deployment of battle tanks, artillery guns, and mortar guns. The deployment of such heavy weaponry is restricted and regulated by this agreement. Is that clear? There is a certain distance, minimum distance they have to maintain from the line of actual control. And there is a cap with regard to the number of such assets that they can deploy into the front lines. When it comes to conducting a training exercise or a practice exercise, there is a mandate on both sides that the exercise should be conducted by facing the other side. They should not face the other country because that could lead to a confusion and miscalculation. Imagine a huge regiment of a Chinese PLA moving towards the Indian border and conducting a military exercise that could send the wrong signals. India might read that as an attempt to attack India, leading to miscalculations. So both sides are under a restriction that any military deployments, exercises, training exercises, it should face inwards, face their own country. They should not face the other country. Such restrictions are created through these agreements, and that is why minor issues have never escalated into a bigger conflict. Now, the reason why repeated incursions keep happening and clashes keep on taking place is because we have not been able to arrive at a common point when it comes to defining the alignment of the border. That's why we have set up the SR mechanism in 2003, the Special Representative Mechanism. Under this, both sides have appointed their special representatives. India has appointed the National Security Advisor as the SR, and the Chinese State Counselor, who's the foreign minister, is the special representative for China. These envoys have been meeting. They held many rounds of talks from 2003 to 2009 to arrive at a political solution. But these SR talks were disrupted as India-China relations got affected when India got closer to United States. But now, after the reset, since 2024, Ladakh standoff has been resolved. Normalcy has been restored in the Ladakh sector. Since then, SR talks have resumed. SR talks are taking place to try and find a political solution. See, there was one opportunity 20 years ago where India-China could have probably brought the border issues to at least some sort of a temporary end. In 2000 May, March to May, in that period, the joint working group on the border had met for the eighth time. They had exchanged maps of all the three sectors of the border, the eastern, western, and central sectors. According to the maps given by India and China, which were exchanged between the two, both sides have no claims or disputes at central sector. In the central sector, which stretches from Himachal, Uttarakhand towards Sikkim, we have no disputes or issues. The disputes are present in western and eastern sectors, in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh sector. In 2002, they followed this up with another exchange of maps, but both sides returned the maps in just 20 minutes because both sides were taking maximalist positions, trying to claim as much territory as possible. India's position was not acceptable to China. China's position was not acceptable to India. And there are specific locations where the disagreements are present. At places like Chumar, Demchok, which are in the western sector, even Panongso Lake, Depsang Plains. These are specific locations where both sides have never come to an agreement as to where exactly is the line of actual control present. And that is exactly where the incursions keep happening and the standoffs keep occurring. If you look at the latest 2020 Ladakh clashes and standoff, it was exactly at these places like Spangnur Gap, Panongso Lake, Depsang Plains, Demchok, etc., where the incursions were carried out by Chinese PLA. India carried out a counter mobilization, resulting in a military standoff. So this article is suggesting that if India, China can build upon these boundary agreements, remain committed to it, enforce them, follow them, work out an arrangement through special representative talks to delineate the LAC, then these incursions can be entirely avoided. In fact, both countries have plenty of opportunities to grow together, to work together, to partner with each other if the boundary issues are handled. So let's hope the reset that has been achieved at the SEO summit could help probably India and China to resolve the differences, identify the alignment of the LAC, settle the differences at these specific points so that in the future, such incursions can be avoided. So now we move on to the smaller articles in today's paper. On page number 4, there's an article related to geography and disaster management. This article deals with the massive floods that have been seen recently in the state of Punjab. As you all know, in the northwestern part of India, there has been very heavy rainfall and massive flooding, right? From the northern to northwestern parts of India, from Jammu and Kashmir towards the Himalayan belt of Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, towards Punjab and Haryana, which includes your Delhi NCR region, there has been very heavy rainfall in the past few weeks, resulting in massive floods. So Punjab in particular sits on the Indus River basin. It is fed by three major rivers of the Indus basin, Ravi, Beas and Satluj. These rivers have been overflowing beyond their carrying capacity, causing large-scale destruction. So it is no doubt a major disaster which has hit the state of Punjab, which is a agrarian state. It's a wheat bowl of India, primarily an agrarian economy. So such intense flooding and breach of reservoirs, embankments and riverbeds, it poses a serious threat for agricultural activity. So there has been a significant loss of life. Several people have lost their lives. A lot of people have been injured. There is significant damage to property and infrastructure as well. Agricultural fields have been flooded, destroying standing crops. Then private individual houses have been completely uprooted. Public infrastructure has been damaged, from roads to railway lines to power cables and telephone mobile connectivity. So this accounts for a big disaster, a massive disaster. It highlights the vulnerability of Punjab as well. So there are two major factors which are responsible behind such recurring disasters in northern northwestern parts of India, particularly in Punjab. According to experts, one factor which is contributing to the abnormal heavy rainfall is climate change and global warming. There's no doubt that we are dealing with a new normal. This has become the new reality today. See, the Arabian Sea has gone through abnormal warming up of the surface level water. The temperatures have risen up, contributing to more moisture laden winds during the monsoon season. And you have the western disturbances coming in from the Mediterranean, right? Moving across West Asia, Central Asia, hitting the northwestern part of India. This sudden violent interaction between western disturbances and the monsoon currents flowing in from Bay of Bengal, from the subcontinent and Arabian Sea, carrying enough moisture, is bringing heavy, intense rainfall. So this has become the new reality in northern northwestern parts of India, where the regions receive very heavy rainfall, the two intense short bursts of rainfall like a cloudburst event. This will obviously overwhelm the drainage channels and it will result in floods. But another reason why flooding has become more recurrent, more persistent, is because Punjab has become more vulnerable. This is due to man made factors. There is a clear anthropogenic factor involved because of illegal encroachments, unplanned construction, unscientific planning at the ground level. It has essentially blocked the drainage channels. The regular catchment area where the water percolates and flows down, they have been disrupted by the setting up of these unplanned urban settlements, construction of roads and buildings, which blocks the flow of water, and all the debris, the waste which is disposed, which also creates a blockage for the flow of water. This has affected the carrying capacity of these rivers. The carrying capacity of Ravi BS Sutlej has gone down significantly despite the presence of water management projects, despite the presence of number of reservoirs, embankments, etc. The huge illegal encroachments, the unplanned settlements, unscientific construction is creating a blockage for the water to flow. And this is what is causing the flooding, the intense flooding that you're seeing. So it's a combination of man made factors and the changes that we are witnessing in climatic and weather patterns. So this is going to be the new reality of this region. So from a disaster management perspective, the region has to plan, prepare. They have to reduce the disaster risk by managing the vulnerability. So illegal encroachments will have to be cleared. The land use planning has to be scientifically done. That is how you can prevent and mitigate the impact of such disasters. So this is a key lesson that you take away from here. So please go through the highlighted points for your reference. Next, there's one important update regarding Russia-Ukraine war. The other day, Russia has launched a massive strike on Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Now, this strike is quite unprecedented. That's why I'm mentioning this today. Because Russia-Ukraine war has been going on almost on a daily basis since 2022. But something new, something which is significant has taken place. Russia has carried out a massive airborne attack using 800 plus drones and decoys, missiles, and even fighter jets. And it has taken direct aim at the capital. And it has primarily attacked the most important government building, which hosts the cabinet, the top government leaders and officials of the Ukrainian government, including the prime minister. Now, this is a clear message from Russia, as US is pushing for a ceasefire and Donald Trump is trying to put pressure on Putin to try and bring this war to an end. Russia is showing to Ukraine, to US, and to Europe that Russia currently holds the trump card, that Russia will decide when the war will end, and it's trying to pressurize Zelensky and the Ukrainian government. So this attack is more of a symbolic attack. See, in the initial phase of the war in 2022, Russia had carried out big attacks on Kiev. Every now and then, some attacks would take place in the capital, but the large-scale attacks had gone down, and the front lines, that is in eastern Ukraine, had become the focal point of this war. But suddenly, Russia has mounted a massive strike on Kiev, taking direct aim at the top government leaders, including the prime minister and the cabinet. The critical government building has been hit, though no significant damage has been reported. It's more of a message that Russia has been sending out, a message that Ukraine will have to surrender. Ukraine will have to agree to the demands of Russia for this war to end. See, Russia has three basic demands right now. right? Even Trump can't force Russia to end the war, which is very evident. It became very clear after the Alaska meet that US doesn't hold the trump cards. They may have Donald Trump, but he doesn't have the trump cards to bring this war to an end. So Putin has three demands over here. One, they want declared neutrality, guaranteed neutrality from Ukraine. They want a guarantee from NATO and EU to stop their eastward expansion. They also want a guarantee on the annexed territory. Russia currently occupies around 20% of Ukrainian territory. They want this to be recognized by the Western powers as Russian territory. That is from Crimea to Kherson and Donbas region, which Russia has taken from Ukraine. They want this to be given international recognition by the Western powers, and Ukraine should accept its neutrality, ensure it remains neutral between Russia and the West, and NATO EU should give a guarantee that they will stop their eastward expansion. There should also be a guarantee that there will be no Western troops in Ukraine. Now, this is what Russia is expecting. These are the three basic demands from Putin. Now, to force Ukraine and Zelensky, probably Russia is now taking direct aim at the capital, at the top leaders of the government itself. I mean, the attack has been designed to be a symbolic attack, if not to kill the top leaders. The intent is very clear. It's to send out a message to bring that pressure on the Ukrainian government and leaders to accept these terms, and then Russia would agree to a ceasefire. So that's why this development is quite significant. Next, on the front page, there's an article related to Sri Lankan Tamil refugees in India and their status in our country. See, India plays host to a large community of Tamil refugees. When Sri Lanka started discriminating and oppressing and targeting the Tamil minorities, right from 1950s, India started taking joint responsibility for the Indian Tamil population, who are more closely connected with Tamil Nadu. So India took in some of the Indian Tamil refugees. Then, as the civil war escalated and the persecution of the Tamil minorities continued, the Sri Lankan Tamils, who are older and settled in Sri Lanka, they also took refuge. Some of them, they took refuge in India. And previously, they were eligible for citizenship as well, through the path of naturalization, provided if they stay in our country for 11 years plus and meet all the other criteria laid down under the Citizenship Act. Sri Lankan Tamil refugees were eligible for Indian citizenship after acquiring a long-term visa. Getting a long-term visa, if you're an illegal migrant or a refugee, is a path towards citizenship. Now, this path has been closed by the Ministry of Home Affairs. See, recently MHA has issued a notification. The notification states that if any illegal migrant or refugee has entered our country from our neighboring countries before 2015, they will not face any penal provisions, meaning they'll not be penalized for it. But however, Sri Lankan Tamil refugees will not be eligible for long-term visas, which will block their path for citizenship. Whereas illegal migrants and refugees who have come from, let's say, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and if they belong to other religious groups such as Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, or Buddhists or Christians, they would be eligible for long-term visas, and eventually the path to citizenship would be open for them. In fact, there is a discussion within the Home Ministry to permanently end the path to citizenship for Sri Lankan Tamil refugees, those who have entered India after 1983. After the civil war broke out, after the anti-Tamil riots broke out in 83, those Sri Lankan Tamils who have come to India seeking refuge, they will no longer be put on the path to citizenship through the process of naturalization. So this is a big change that India has carried out with regard to its policy towards refugees and illegal migrants. Now, coming to the next article related to Northeast India, the security situation in the Northeast. See, recently, the Home Ministry has signed the suspension of operations agreement with the Kuki Zo armed groups that were responsible for violence in Manipur, the ethnic violence. Manipur, as you know, has been consumed by large-scale ethnic violence perpetrated by the militant insurgent groups of the Metis and the Kuki-Zo community. This has been essentially an ethnic conflict between the majority Metis and the minority Kuki-Zo-Zomi groups. So the armed militant insurgent groups of both sides have been engaging in targeted violence against each other, resulting in large-scale destabilization. Now, slowly things are coming back to normalcy, and it has been announced that Prime Minister Modi is going to visit Manipur finally on the 13th of September, in another few days. So, to prepare the groundwork for the PM's visit, the Home Ministry went ahead and signed the suspension of operations agreement with the Kuki-Zo armed groups, which essentially guarantees a sort of peace and stability in the Kuki dominated hill regions, particularly in Churchandpur, where the Prime Minister is expected to visit. Now, as part of this agreement, which was announced a few days ago, just last week, it had been reported that the suspension of operations agreement is being restored, meaning security operations against the Kuki-Zo groups will stop. The Indian Army, Assam Rifles, and other security forces which are deployed here in a counterinsurgency role, they will halt their operations against Kuki-Zo groups. Two groups were part of this agreement. One is the KNO, the Kuki National Organization, a militant insurgent group, and the other is the United People's Front, the UPF. So these two Kuki-Zo groups had signed the suspension of operations agreement. Now the PIB release that was released by the government, the Press Information Bureau, which came out with the official press release, had allegedly given a twist on this agreement. According to the Kuki-Zo groups, the agreement includes some sort of a constitutional guarantee to provide some sort of autonomy to the Kuki-Zo dominated hill areas in Manipur. That's what the groups are alleging. They are alleging that the government has agreed, the Ministry of Home Affairs with the state government of Manipur have agreed in this agreement to provide some sort of autonomy under the constitution itself, meaning they are basically looking at some sort of political autonomy with the devolution of authority as well, maybe as an autonomous council under the sixth schedule, or some of the leaders of the outfits are saying that they are looking for a union territory status with a legislature of their own. There is no official word on this by the government. The government gave a different spin on this. The government said the agreement includes the suspension of operations from both sides, meaning a ceasefire, and eventual resolution of the issues through talks. That government was willing to talk to the Kuki-Zo armed groups to ensure the conflict comes to an end by addressing some of their grievances. But now the Kuki-Zo groups are saying that PIB has twisted the actual agreement which was agreed to. And they're saying that the government has agreed to provide for a union territory with a separate legislature for the Kuki-dominated hill areas of Manipur. So we need a confirmation from the government regarding this. Of course, as of now, there is no confirmation. It's highly unlikely the government would have agreed to this, because making a separate union territory is a very big step, which would invite the backlash from the majority Metis. So breaking Manipur into a union territory and giving a separate legislature for the Kuki region is obviously something which would trigger the Metis, and it's highly unlikely, I doubt whether the government has agreed to something like this. But the Kuki-Zo groups are saying that. They're saying that PIB is twisting what they had agreed to, and the government had promised them union territory with a legislature. So let's see, let's wait and watch. It's a developing topic. Next few days is very crucial. As the PM prepares to visit Manipur, we will get some more clarity on this. Maybe some sort of autonomy might be granted. Maybe some sort of a devolution of power might be granted within the ambit of the Indian Constitution. So let's wait and watch, and we'll keep covering this particular topic. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look and let's wrap it up. On page 5, there's an article related to science and technology. The article deals with a very deadly infection, a fatal infection caused by a type of amoeba, which is commonly referred to as the brain-eating amoeba. I know it sounds very gruesome and scary, and honestly, the disease, if infected, is indeed quite scary and fatal. Especially in the state of Kerala, there have been multiple cases of this particular disease, the brain-eating disease caused by a type of amoeba. Technically or scientifically, it's referred to as amoebic meningoencephalitis. This amoeba, which is present in stagnant pools of water, let's say there is a pond or a lake or a river where the water has largely remained stagnant. Usually, such stagnant water bodies might be contaminated with this deadly amoeba known as Naegleria fowleri. Please make a note of this amoeba. So, when water bodies are contaminated with this amoeba, and if you dive into it, if you take a swim, the amoeba can essentially enter your nose, enter your respiratory tract, and from the nose, it can directly lodge into the brain, leading to severe complications. It can rapidly multiply and spread in the nasal canal and going right up to the brain. And initially, you will experience symptoms like fever, severe body ache, headache, stiffness in your neck. This is a classic feature of amoebic meningoencephalitis. Very quickly, it can escalate into a serious condition where the patient can suffer memory loss, seizures, can even go into a coma. And without the right treatment, the patient will eventually pass away as well. So it's a very fatal, deadly infection. Many such cases are reported in Kerala and in other parts of India as well sometimes. The reason why it mainly occurs is because such deadly amoeba can be present in stagnant pools of water. So, one way to prevent getting infected is by being cautious. You should not dive into a stagnant pool of water. You should not be swimming in such stagnant pools of water, be it a well, be it a pond or a lake where water remains stagnant, right? You should never go swimming in such areas without a proper nose plug or a ear plug, because the contaminated water, if it enters your nose, the amoeba can travel up the nasal canal right into the brain, deposit there, start multiplying, leading to this deadly fatal disease. It is treatable if the health support is provided at the right time and in the early stages, but in many cases, the fatality rate is quite high. Next, art and culture topic. In Arunachal Pradesh, Sunrise Festival is being launched, which will be celebrated in December, January. The Sunrise Festival, it essentially pays tribute to the first place in India where the sun rays hit during sunrise, which is Arunachal Pradesh, particularly the Anjav district. In the Anjav district, which is located at the easternmost point of India, you have a border village called Dong. It is this village in Anjav district of Arunachal Pradesh which receives the first sunlight in the morning. So it's often referred to as the land of the rising sun. Arunachal Pradesh itself is often referred to as the land of the rising sun as far as India is concerned. So to mark this location and to celebrate the rich history, art, and culture of this state and the region here, the Sunrise Festival is being launched, which will be celebrated in end of December, which will run up to early January. So please note the location of this particular village where the festival is going to be launched. It's located on the borders with Tibet. The Dong village in Anjav district, which receives the first set of sun rays, is located right on the borders with China. Now, coming to the last article, just a few hours ago, around 13, 14 hours ago, there was an outage of internet. I'm sure many of you would have experienced yesterday night. You would not have been able to access the internet, or there were disruptions, or it was very slow. The latency had gone up, right? You're not able to watch videos or enjoy high speed bandwidth. Why? That's because a few hours ago, probably around 14, 16 hours ago, there was a major disruption reported in the Red Sea where undersea cables have been cut. Please understand, the backbone of your internet is the underwater cables, the undersea cables that connect country to country, continent to continent. So from India to Europe and Africa, there is a major underwater cable that runs through West Asia, through Red Sea route. There is another set of undersea cables that run from the eastern side of India, from Chennai towards Southeast Asia and Australia, which connects India with the east. There is one set of undersea cables running from Mumbai towards West Asia, Europe, and Africa, which connects India with the west. These cables have been disrupted and we don't know the reason as of now. So this has not just economic significance, there is a geopolitical security significance here. Because this is a region which is affected by conflict. And the Houthis of Yemen have carried out large scale disruption in the Red Sea. They have attacked ships that have been linked with Israel and US as they oppose the Gaza war, and in support for the Palestinians, the Houthi rebels backed by Iran have been launching attacks against the ships passing through the Red Sea route. Then, during the Gaza war, the Houthis have threatened to cut off the submarine cables. They've already issued such threats, and they made one attempt a couple of years ago. They had made one attempt to cut off an undersea cable in the Red Sea. It is this cable which will bring internet to even Pakistan, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and many other countries in the region. So, with this disruption yesterday, multiple countries suffered latency in the internet speed and in internet connectivity. Is that clear? Right now, further investigation is being done whether it was a case of an accident or whether it was a deliberate act of sabotage. So, that is something you need to keep in mind. And also, please note that some of the undersea cables here is owned and maintained by Microsoft. Now, why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because the Houthis have been looking to target companies like Microsoft, because Microsoft allegedly backs Israel by providing technological support. You might have heard of the Azure cloud system of Microsoft, just like Amazon Web Services. Israeli defense forces and security forces are known to use Microsoft's Azure cloud services. So the Houthis had declared Microsoft's infrastructure as a target in the past. There has been intelligence available indicating that extremist groups might target the internet infrastructure in the region. So whether this disruption that we saw yesterday, was it a regular failure of the infrastructure or a accident, or was it a case of sabotage, is something that we should wait and figure out. So this is something you should be aware of. Please pay attention to the submarine cables, the location, and the route, the alignment of the submarine cables. This is very, very crucial in today's geopolitical environment. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have understood all the key topics. And if you like the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.